Please check the description for more info. Final Fantasy XIII, Episode 0, Promise. Part 2, Stranger. Chapter 1. Vanille had slept lightly. She had dreamt many dreams and cried many times, but her memories of them were hazy and she couldn't remember a single one. It was that sort of sleep. Vanille, she had heard, or thought she heard, and opened her eyes. Fang? Did she just imagine she heard her name, or had that just been a dream too? Fang, who had been sleeping beside her, was nowhere to be found. Fang! Where are you? Vanille stood up and looked around. She felt a crushing helplessness. Every day it grew worse. Vanille went out into the passageway and called Fang's name. There was no need to raise her voice. The hall was wide and even the smallest sound echoed loudly. Sure enough, this time she heard Fang's voice coming from below. Vanille ran down the stairs and hopped onto the elevator. She knew where Fang was now and could go straight to her. She felt wind on her cheek. Cool dawn air blew from the entrance and she could see that outside it was still dark. What's up? Fang spoke before she could say a word. Nothing, Vanille said. She wished she could ask Fang the same, ask her what she was doing, but she didn't. Instead, Vanille just stood quietly beside her. From here you could see the ocean, and the sky, but no horizon. What a strange sky, Fang said, looking up. It was still dark. She had done the same on the day they had woken up. They had gone outside, and Fang had looked up at the sky. When I look at it, I can't breathe. I mean, what is that? Why can I see a city above my head? Cocoon was a world in the shape of a ball. Inside the ball there were cities, there were oceans, there were forests. The space trap between them was the sky. It was a very different sky from the one they had known. It's not just the sky. Even the ocean is weird. It didn't smell of salt at all. It did when you got close enough. Even that's weird. Here, I thought I could drink it, but then... salt water. It tricked me. We did think it was a lake at first. Every little thing is weird here. I don't get any of it, Fang sighed. It's like a dream. One that you can't understand. Yeah, I'm amazed these guys can live in a place like this. I wish it was a dream. Yes, if only it had been a dream. Yesterday, and the day before that, and the first day they had woken up. If it had only been a dream, Vanille thought. I wish we had woken up just today. If only reality had only started from this moment. It was probably stupid to think that. It was probably just her being naive. But maybe, just maybe if that had happened, things might have turned out differently. It would be the same either way. We complete our focus and return to Grand Pulse. What else is there for us? Yes, you're right, Vanille smiled and nodded. But she couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe if they had remained crystals, that things might have been different. That if things had changed even a little bit, there might not have been so much pain. Hey, don't worry. No focus could ever be completed in only 3 days. Fang must have thought she looked sad, because it was the 4th day since they had woken up, and they hadn't got any closer to completing their focus. When Vanille thought back on the 3 days since they had awoken, it made her grow dizzy and ill. It was then that she'd really feel that they should have never woken up. If they had kept on sleeping, then nothing would have happened, and no one else would have gotten involved. Vanille raised her hand toward the brightening sky. On the day they had awoken, she had stood beside Fang, looking up at the sky. Beyond her raised hand, she could see a city. Such a strangely colored sky. It was the color of beginnings. Chapter 2. They needed time. Time to understand where they were, and what sort of situation that they had been thrust into. Just after she awoke, Fang was somewhat between dreams and reality. Vanille herself felt a little hazy, and wasn't good for much of anything. But eventually they managed to shake off the fog that clung to them. Looking around them, they saw that they were in the temple. It was the chamber of the l'Cie where crystallized l'Cie are enshrined. It was in it they realized what had happened. They had completed their focus and gone to their final rest. But now a new focus had been given to them, and they had been woken up once more. It was easy to figure out that much. But... Hey, just what happened before we turned into crystal? Fang said. You don't remember? Yeah, my head's all messed up. I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Fang's voice was shaking. She was looking at the l'Cie brand on her arm. It was scorched a livid white. It was only later that Vanille realized Fang had been trying to smile. I'm... broken. Fang was nearly in tears. This is a Fang that Vanille had never seen before. Vanille reached out her arms, enfolding her into them. "Me too," she whispered, but her voice was like a stranger's. When her shaking finally subsided, they stood, and Vanille smiled. "Why don't we go home?" One focus had already been completed. Surely they would be welcomed back with open arms. Their new focus could be completed later, even if they didn't know what that focus was. "And if everyone we knew back home are already old fogies?" Fang said, and smiled. It was a true smile this time. "Do you think so? Maybe not that much time has passed, and they'll all say, 'Oh, are you two back already?'" "I wonder how many years have passed." "It can only be days, you know." "Then they be working us too hard. I mean, at least give us a half a year's rest." Joking together, they made their way outside, expecting to see their home once more. "This can't be!" It was night, but it was so bright they could see the buildings that made up the city surrounding them. There were lights in every nook and cranny, and an ocean reflecting it all back to them. It was a strange ocean with no horizon. Looking up, they saw an even stranger sky. At first they thought it was a sky with many stars, but then they realized it was not stars at all, but the lights of a faraway city. Could something like this truly be called a sky? "Where?" "We're not in Grand Pulse," Fang said. Vanille closed her eyes for a moment. "I'll just look one more time," she thought. "Maybe it will be different." When she opened them again, nothing had changed. They looked at the ocean and sky but didn't speak. There was nothing to say. In silence they returned to the temple. They were hungry. Cocoon, and they knew it was Cocoon, was no place for them to be wandering around, hungry and unarmed. In the place where the lassie were enshrined, offerings were always brought. There was food that would not rot no matter how long it was left unattended, as well as weapons and equipments that the lassie left here had used. Vanille had heard that offerings were made daily so that the crystallized lassie could sleep soundly, but it was probably done in case they awoke once more. "What the hell is this?" The food that had been left in offering had deteriorated so badly that it was nothing anyone would be able to eat. They searched the rest of the temple for signs of anything edible, but it was a wasted effort. Food offerings had only been left in the chamber of the lassie. "Is someone playing tricks on us?" "Surely not. But it is strange." The offering should have lasted at least 10 years. Both Fang and Vanille knew that quite well. It was tradition to bring new foodstuffs to the temple every 10 years. There would be a festival, and everyone would partake of the food. It was so they could share their joy of the festival with the sleeping lassie. The food wasn't something a child would find delicious, but it wasn't inedible. The food they had before them looked and smelled terrible. Never mind the taste. It looked dangerous to eat. "It's not just food. Look at that," Vanille said. There were festival garments, and a box to hold them in. Both had a faded, worn look about them. "This too." Fang held up her favorite sphere and twisted its head. Vanille didn't know what was wrong with it, but perhaps some part of it had decayed. "It looks as though everything had been exposed to the wind outside." The air inside the temple was still. This shouldn't have happened. Not just to the food, but the metal and cloth shouldn't have decayed so easily. "So the only things in this room that didn't change were us, as crystals," Fang said. Just how many years had they slept? From the looks of things, it wasn't only in tens of years, but perhaps hundreds of years. "Forget everyone being old now. By now, everyone will be dead." "No." Vanille looked down, biting her lip, trying to get herself under control. "Don't make that face," Fang said, slapping her on the back, and stood up. "First, we've got to eat." "But we can't eat this." Vanille looked down at the offerings. The rotten food, the faded festival garments. She had loved wearing these for the festival. "There was an ocean, right? There was even a forest. It was a little far, but we'll find food. It'll work out." Fang grabbed her spear and smiled. "How strange," Vanille thought. "When Fang says it'll work out, I really think it will." "You're right." Vanille took her own weapons and stood up. It was already dawn, the perfect time for hunting in enemy territory. Unlike midday, there wouldn't be many people about, but it was still bright enough to see. First they tried the ocean. In the forest they ran the chance of getting lost, and in any case it was closer to the temple. They might not find anything in time for breakfast, but they would be able to have lunch at least. Or so they thought. "Looks like we'll be having breakfast after all." Vanille looked down in amazement at the fish wriggling in her arms. It wasn't unusual that Fang would be able to catch fish with a flash of her spear, but it was very strange that Vanille would have no trouble. "Are these fish wrong in the head?" It seemed these fish didn't have any predators, so they didn't realize there was any danger. When Fang and Vanille would move towards them, they would try to escape, but they moved far too slowly.
Are these even okay to eat?
Game that is too easily caught could be poisonous, or have a bad taste, and be unfit to eat. They both started thinking that perhaps these fish wouldn't be any use to them at all.
My, you young ladies are quite good at that, aren't you?
A voice called them from the beach. They stiffened, instantly regretting their lack of vigilance, and turned around. What they found was an elderly couple, smiling and clapping.
How funny to see people catching fish in Bodhum this way.
But I see now it's better to use a harpoon rather than a fishing pole.
Vanille didn't catch what the name of the fish was, but it seemed it was a common one in Cocoon.
Oh, sorry, we're probably bothering you.
Didn't mean to be rude at all.
They looked sad for a moment, but their smile returned quickly and they took each other's hands, moving off down the beach. What was that? Fang had waited until the couple had moved out of sight before speaking.
They were from Cocoon, right?
They had thought if they were found, they would be attacked immediately, no questions asked. This was, after all, the Viper's nest in the sky. The clothing they wore was very different from anything seen on Grand Pulse. If that was the dress of Cocoon, then they would have been spotted as enemies in an instant.
But they didn't seem to be on guard.
So you think maybe they're as stupid as the fish? Well, they were old, you know. They get that way.
You're probably right,
Vanille said, but she thought of another possibility.
Maybe they're trying to catch us off guard.
You mean they were just buying time until they could bring their friends? Oh yeah, I can see that happening.
Then it might be dangerous to go back right away.
Yeah, we should look around first. They got out of the ocean and walked back in the direction of the temple. It was better to gather information than try to conceal themselves. If they met face to face with the enemy a second time, they would just have to figure out what to do then. It wasn't as though they were unarmed. They had enough training that they would be able to put up a fight even if they were attacked from behind. In the end, all their training was useless. It wasn't that they weren't able to fight back, but the enemy never attacked. They had seen them, had watched them from far away, but they were unarmed and stood unguarded, so there was no reason to attack from their end. They didn't want to give the enemy any incentive to attack, so they only kept watch. They expected to be attacked at any moment and kept their guard up. They were prepared. What the hell is wrong with these guys? Fang whispered, watching the people who had their unguarded backs facing them. Vanille was in agreement. These people were strangely unwary.
Maybe they don't know that we're the enemy?
Even though we're armed? You must be joking.
But maybe that's why they haven't realized we're the enemy, Vanille thought. If not, that first elderly couple we met, and that group of boys who just passed us by, would have never ignored us like this.
A sudden flapping of birds' wings interrupted her thoughts. Fang drew her spear from her back and held it at the ready. Winged creatures give you no chances. Your only options are fight or flight. The sound it made was not that of a large creature, so fighting was the best course of action. Vanille readied her weapon and jumped in beside her.
Huh?
They both froze in mid-swing. How? The white bird had been taken out with a single stroke. The bird was far larger than any of the fish they had caught. How could a monster bird be this weak? A bird this size should be a meat-eater, and strong. It wasn't the kind of creature that should have been brought down so easily.
Do you think maybe it eats nuts and fruits? I mean, its beaks and claws aren't even sharp.
After checking it over to make sure it was dead, Vanille grabbed it by the legs. But how could it have been this stupid? If this was Grand Pulse, it would have been dead in an instant.
Yeah, if something like this was down there, it would have been on the dinner table within a day.
As much fish and meat as you can eat. Nice place. The vegetables were in abundance as well. Further along the path there was a field, but no fences or wires set up to keep out the birds and beasts. It was as if the farmers were telling them that they could take as much as they liked. And so their first meal on enemy territory was more luxurious than they could ever have dreamed. While it was unfortunate that they weren't able to find any cookware or spices, that was just asking for too much. Since they couldn't start a fire in the temple, they cooked their fish and meat outside. For kindling, they used a priest's ceremonial garb and staff. The priests would die if they could see this.
Do you think we might get in trouble?
This is an emergency. It's all right.
Yeah, I suppose. Right now our survival is more important. This looks good.
They both bit into the freshly cooked meat.
Ugh!
What the hell is this? They stared at the meat they had just bit into. It wasn't inedible. It didn't even really taste bad. In fact, it hardly had any taste at all. The meat was watery and stringy. They could hardly believe it, so just to make sure they tried the fish and vegetables. But the taste was the same. These taste bad even for wild creatures. Different fish tasted differently, so it was possible they had just chosen a bad kind. And wild game usually doesn't taste nearly as good as domestically bred animals. And yet,
But we found the vegetables in a field, right?
Vanille nodded. She had thought the soil looked bad, what with it being unguarded and all, but it had been well watered and weeded. There was no question about it being a tended field.
How could these cocoon guys eat this crap?
Fang grumbled, but continued to eat the meat anyway. Vanille followed her example and bit into a vegetable. At least it seemed it was okay to eat. When they were finished eating, they buried the remains of their fire and returned inside the temple. This place just grew stranger and stranger. Slow-moving fish, idiotic birds, and people who could clearly see they are different, but are not suspicious of them. Somehow it was hard to accept, even given the excuse that this was a different world.
Hey, wanna go see the city tomorrow? Already? We won't get anything done by just sitting here.
It was true. They needed to find out more information. How long they had been in Cocoon, why the temple had been brought here. There were so many questions.
We'll have to cross that bridge eventually anyway. Why?
Our focus, Fang said, holding onto the arm with her scorched white brand.
I might be able to remember something if we go straight into enemy territory.
What would Fang do once she remembered? No, there's only one thing she would do. Fight.
We don't have to hurry. I mean, we only just woke up, right?
It's already the second day. Tomorrow will be the third.
Well, yeah.
Are you scared? Fang's eyes grew soft and she patted Vanille on the back to soothe her. Come on, you saw those guys today. The two of us are stronger than all of them together.
No, I can't tell a thing yet,
Vanille thought.
Not yet. I'm not worried. I have you with me. Things I want to drive from my thoughts. Can I make them no longer real? Can I pretend they never happened?
Vanille was suddenly struck with an idea. It grew brighter in her mind and her heart felt light as air.
Okay, let's go. It'll be alright, I'm sure of it.
Vanille smiled brightly. All she had to think about was tomorrow. It had to go well tomorrow. Nothing else mattered. Chapter 3.
What is all this? Do you think it might be a festival?
Being surrounded by the people of Cocoon was no longer as surprising as it first was. When groups of people passed by, they didn't tense up as they first had. Many people had walked past them on their way from the temple to where they were now, but none of them had tried to attack, and none of them had looked at Fang and Vanille oddly. Walking along the beach, they had seen girls in similar clothing to their own swimming in the water. It was a relief to see them. Apparently the people around here had mistaken them for one of their own. It was easy then to slip by them unnoticed. There were so many people, many more than they ever would have thought to see in one place, especially in such a narrow, cramped space between buildings. Both Vanille and Fang stood in the crowd, their jaws hanging open as they stared at the sight. Let's go already, Fang said, shaking her head and setting off. Vanille followed. It had been only the two of them standing in the middle of the path, while people rushed past them on all sides. Walking along the road, they came to the realization that all of these people were shopping. Upon closer inspection, they found that all the buildings set up on either side of the street were stores.
Are all of these buildings shops?
Just how many were there? More than Vanille had ever seen before. There were even several shops that specialized in clothing, each bursting with a variety of color and design. No wonder their clothings were not thought odd, with such an abundance of different styles. There were many different shops. Vanille saw a shop that had accessories, another that had what looked like paper and pens. There was a furniture shop on that side of the street, and on the other there was even one that had what she had thought were some kind of vehicles lined up outside. Looking at the people, she saw a girl happily picking through racks of clothing. Over there, a small child pouting, maybe trying to get his parents to buy him something. A happy couple was leaving a jewelry shop. Every single one of them had a joyful look on their face.
I feel a little dizzy.
Vanille was tired, even though she hadn't even walked very far. Trying to take everything in on both sides of the street had done her in.
Hey, Fang,
she almost said, but stopped herself just in time. Fang looked grim. Thieves, she whispered. Vanille grabbed onto Fang's hand before she could act. She understood what Fang was feeling, understood it better than anyone. Vanille felt the same way. But right now they were right in the middle of enemy territory, and they only carried small, concealed weapons with them.
Fang, you can't.
I know, but... Her fist clenched as she tried to suppress her anger. All of this was stolen from us, but still they... It was well known that Cocoon was a den of vipers. The fallacy of Cocoon would come to Grand Pulse, and take as much material as they wanted. Once they even took a whole town. They would steal farmland just before harvest, and tear rare materials straight from the earth. That's why they had thought the people from Cocoon were their enemies. But after seeing that elderly couple yesterday, and all of the people who passed by them, she had started to think it was odd. And today, seeing people shopping, doubts started to grow in her mind. Did these people truly wish to destroy Grand Pulse and take everything from it? Vanille had started to think that from what she had seen, they weren't so different from her own people. Their clothes were different, their houses were different, the taste of their vegetables and meat were different, but perhaps on the inside, they were the same.
Today we're gathering information, right?
She whispered in Fang's ear. Vanille didn't want her to do anything rash. Right, Fang said in a clipped tone. Vanille opened her mouth to say something, but she heard a voice behind her calling to them. Hey there, ladies! You all alone? Going shopping? You don't look like you're from around here. The sound of their voices, Fang stiffened. Turning around, they found two young men, smiling. Vanille looked at them cautiously. Their faces were open and friendly, but these men were far different from the elderly couple they had met the day before. Surely this time they were just trying to catch them off guard so they could capture them. You aren't scared of us, are you? Don't worry, we aren't some weirdos. The look on their face and their body language gave lie to the truth behind their words. They must be planning something. Vanille stepped back, and Fang took her concealed weapon in hand. Hey, wanna go have something to drink? Maybe we could go out for lunch. At the word lunch, Fang and Vanille turned to look at each other. They could not be enemies if they offered to sit across from each other at the table and partake in food and drink.
Really? You'd eat with us?
Vanille never thought that an enemy would say such a thing. There's a really good restaurant nearby. Come on, we'll show you. Yeah, it's a little early, but it can get pretty crowded when lunchtime hits. Vanille glanced at Fang. She looked a bit at a loss and was still on guard, ready to pull out her weapon at any moment. Vanille shook her head slightly to tell Fang to let it go for now. Alright, fine. Let's eat. Fang turned back around and nodded to the two men. Both of them smiled. They were real smiles this time, not fake like before. Vanille thought that maybe she had only been imagining that they had been hiding something. Fang grimaced as usual, but she couldn't refuse them. Refusing to sit at the table with another was the same as declaring war. It was too dangerous to start a war against this many people, and if she did, then she might never find a way to get her memory back. So they followed the two men, not speaking to them or to each other, as they showed them to a bustling restaurant filled with people. So what do you want to eat? One of the men asked once they reached the table.
How odd, Vanille thought. If they're the ones who are making the offering, why must we choose what to eat? We're supposed to eat what they give us. That's how it always is.
The menu is over there. The other one smiled and pointed to the wall. Vanille grew even more confused.
Just what do they want us to do?
What was written there, that is to say, the markings on the wall were in the writing of Cocoon. It probably explained what they had to do, but unfortunately, neither Vanille nor Fang could read any of it. Vanille motioned with her eyes, trying to ask Fang what they should do. Fang nodded and went for her weapon.
Not that!
Vanille yelled, and rushed to stop her before it was too late. The two men looked at her questioningly.
It's nothing. I mean, really, it's nothing. Don't worry, it's...
She forced the muscles of her mouth into a smile. Fortunately, it seemed to fool them. If you can't decide, what about the special?
Okay, we'll take that.
Vanille nodded. Whatever they had to do to get out of this without looking too odd. One of them ordered, and Vanille breathed a sigh of relief. So where are you girls from? From one problem to another. This wasn't a question so easily answered. She'd just have to try to smile and fool them once more.
Well, far.
Far?
Yeah, really far.
Just in case they decided to ask for the city name, Vanille quickly asked them a question instead.
So where are you from?
We're from Eden. That's where our university is.
Eden. University?
Yeah, Eden University. It looked like repeating the question was the wrong thing to do. Vanille whispered in Fang's ear.
Have you ever heard of Eden? Or University?
Don't ask me.
Yeah.
Fang put a finger to her forehead as though she was thinking. Then her face cleared.
If Universe is the name of their city, then maybe Eden is the name of the mountain or valley it's in.
Vanille slapped her knee.
Of course, that must be it.
Excuse me, is something wrong? Whispering amongst themselves, they had completely forgotten about the two men. Fortunately, it didn't seem that they should hear what they were talking about, but it had been very rude of them.
Sorry, it's nothing. So what is this University place like?
University? Vanille didn't know why he had repeated it back to her, but she nodded. The two men started talking excitedly about Universe City. It was obvious they were proud of their city and loved it very much. Vanille wondered if it was an easy place to live, or if just these two in particular had a lot of hometown pride. Perhaps it was both. In any case, it meant they wouldn't have to talk about themselves. Even though she could barely understand any of what they were saying, she listened and nodded along, smiling. "Sorry to keep you waiting," the waitress said, interrupting them in the middle of their story. She laid out their dishes along the table.
What? Why is the food already here?
Vanille said, surprised. She had thought it would take much longer for the food to arrive. That's why she had tried so hard to get them to talk about themselves. "What do you mean, why?" He looked at her strangely. Apparently she shouldn't have been so surprised.
It's nothing. Oh, look at this. Everything looks so delicious and I'm hungry right now."
Then they made another mistake. Joining their fingers together to say grace was a normal thing for her and Fang, but the two sitting across from them did nothing but stare. "What's that? Some sort of spell?"
Uh-huh. Yes, of course.
You girls are so funny.
Do you think so?
Well, so long as they only thought of them as funny, they would be safe.
As long as they don't start to think we're odd,
Vanille told herself. She took a bite of the food. It didn't have a very strong flavor, but it wasn't bad. It was a proper meal this time, not like what they had eaten on the previous day. It was food that someone had made them, and for that they would be thankful, even if it wasn't to their own taste.
"Is this the salt?"
"It better not be sugar," Fang said.
"Oh, good thinking. We can just put salt on it. Pass me."
"What are you doing? You can't put that much on." Another mistake.
"How many times has it been?"
She felt like crying. Fang, being Fang, didn't seem to care much. "Really? I always eat it like this." Fang dumped salt onto her meal and popped it into her mouth. The other two stared in shocked silence.
Well, she just really likes salty things."
It was completely true. Fang did love salty food. But apparently, salty food in Cocoon didn't go to quite this extent.
"Oh yeah, so what's that?"
Ignoring their reactions to her food preference, Fang pointed out the window. You could see the top of the temple from here. "Huh? Oh, you mean the pulse vestige?" He seemed relieved to have found a change of subject. Neither of them looked at Fang's plate again. They probably were trying not to think about the salt.
"Yeah, how long has this vestige been there?"
They gave her an odd look. Maybe this was something that even children on Cocoon knew about. The hole they were digging for themselves kept growing deeper. Vanille tried to make excuses for their obvious lack of knowledge.
"Well, you guys just look so smart. Yeah, I bet you're really, really smart."
Well, that compliment was as see-through as a summer's day. It was worth a shot. Even if it didn't make them happy, no one got mad about compliments.
"I just thought, you guys might know more about things than we do. Like, in more detail."
The suspicious look fell from their faces and they grew more cheerful. "Well, according to one theory, it has been there since 666 years ago, though some sources say since 600 and others say 650 years ago. Vanille's eyes opened wide. They had thought that perhaps it had been a couple hundred years, but to hear the actual date was shocking. "But the textbooks have it written as several hundred years ago, after the War of Transgression. The fal'Cie brought it up from Pulse." Of course, the theory that it was 666 years ago is quite popular, but there is no actual proof. There will always be different opinions. Several hundred years ago, 666 years ago. Those words kept echoing in her mind. None of the rest of what they said registered.
"So that vestige or whatever, what about now? Did it cause problems for the guys on Pulse when it was taken?"
The two men glanced at each other. Vanille worried that they had said something wrong again, but no, this time they laughed. "Cause problems for them? Are you joking? It's not like there are any people on Pulse."
"There aren't."
Even Fang was dumbstruck. "Pulse is hell. No one can live there. Everyone knows that. Did you girls not pay attention in history class?" He was just making fun of them, but words were caught in her throat. She knew she had to say something so they wouldn't become suspicious of them again, but she only managed a weak laugh. "Well, they say that there are barbarians down there that are no better than animals, but..."
"Barbarians?"
"Yeah, they can hardly speak and wear animal skins. During the War of Transgressions, the Pulse fal'Cie tried to put them to work, but they say they weren't much good for anything." A bloody red haze clouded Vanille's vision. Those useless barbarians were her people. "Since those are the only ones living down there, it hardly matters what we take, does it? Since we're putting it to good use up here, they should be thanking us." She had heard of a town that lived in poverty after their farmland had been ripped from the ground before it could be harvested. The railroad was stopped, they couldn't get any fuel or food, and they all froze to death.
"Thankful? He says they should be thankful? They know nothing," Vanille thought. "They don't have to get their own hands dirty. They don't even realize what horrible things they're doing. They just live off what their fal'Cie took from us."
Beneath the table, her fist shook. She could only think of breaking the plate that sat in front of her. It wasn't self-control that was on her mind, but waiting. Fang would take the lead. She would know what to do.
I need to see you outside for a minute.
Fang stopped eating and stood up.
What? But we're in the middle of eating. It doesn't matter. Come with me. Now.
Fang's voice was quiet. A small smile hung about her lips. It wasn't a real smile, but they were easily fooled. Vanille saw beneath that smile, but said nothing. Intelligence must not have been one of their better qualities. When Fang called them out in the middle of a meal, they should have known what was coming. They should have known that there was to be a fight. It was a breaking of truce, a declaration of war. Or maybe this was something that the people of Cocoon just did not understand. Even so, they came along quietly, so they couldn't have been very bright. Even when it became obvious they were being taken to a place that was away from prying eyes, they didn't seem wary or even question it. It only took 2 or 3 of Fang's punches to knock them out. Pathetic, just as weak as the bird and the fish from yesterday.
So sorry for being a barbarian. That's the last thing I need bastards like you to tell me. You're even worse than worms crawling through the dirt.
Of course they couldn't hear a word of what she was saying. They were probably happier not knowing. Fang kicked them for a while, but they then seemed to think of something and knelt down.
What's wrong?
This stuff, Fang muttered and began rifling through their clothing.
Oh!
They might be able to find out something. Weapons could be taken and used for their benefit. Vanille decided to help and leaned over the second man.
It's strange.
What is?
He doesn't have any money on him. What about that one?
Let's see. No, nothing. In fact, he didn't have much of anything. They hadn't been carrying any bags with them either.
Then how did they pay at the restaurant?
When they had left the restaurant, one of them had gone over to the cashier to pay. If he wasn't carrying any money, how could he have paid? Vanille turned him over and searched his pants pocket.
What's this?
Vanille said, pulling out a thin board about the size of her hand. It looked like it was made of metal. It was colored light gray, but had a black circle near the center.
Fang, look at this. Is it a card of some kind? This guy has one too. I wonder what they use it for,
Vanille thought, and pressed the black circle. The gray part lit up.
Ah, no! What's it doing?
Surprised, Vanille threw the card away from her. She knelt on the ground, watching it, and saw the color leach away until the card became clear enough to see through. She wondered what sort of device it could be. How could such a thin device pull off such a trick? There was nowhere to hide the wires or innards. Vanille continued staring as a 3-dimensional image began to form above the card. It was a person's face.
This is to identify the owner of the card.
Vanille picked it up and tried pressing the black circle again. There was no change in the image. She pressed it in various other places, but nothing happened.
I think only the owner can use it. It probably won't do anything else.
Fang nodded and looked over the other card, checking to see if there was anything else they could do with the card. Suddenly she looked up, surprised. The sound of flapping could be heard close by. Jumping up, they hid in the shadows of the wall. A white bird, much bigger and more dangerous-looking water bird they had seen yesterday, and swooped down. Though it was a bird, its eyes were positioned on the front of its face, rather than on the side. It almost looked human. As suddenly as it had arrived, it flew off. In the shadows of its wings, they could see the sharp claws of a bird of prey. They didn't seem inclined to attack, circling once above their heads before vanishing into the sky.
Did that bird see what we were doing? It looked so odd. Of course not. There's no way it could have.
Yes, you're right. Vanille thought she was jumping from being so deep in enemy territory. Oh yeah, forgot about this. Vanille was still holding onto the card. She pressed the black circle and it lit up even brighter than it had before. There was a short electrical crackle before the light went off and grew quiet.
Did you break it?
Probably. Fang clicked her tongue and pressed the black circle even harder. It lit up again and the color drained and grew clear.
Oh good, I guess it's not broken after all,
Vanille said in relief. She leaned over to get a closer look. Though the other card had shown the face of its owner, this one showed nothing at all. No writing on the card, but the place where the face should have been was blank. It looked as though the owner had been erased.
Oh, maybe it's broken.
Maybe. Fang poked at the black part again. The screen changed and words formed, but unfortunately the words were written in the writing of Cocoon, which neither of them could read.
Do you think that we'd be able to use it now?
It had overwritten the original owner's information, but there was no telling what would happen if they used it themselves. They had been lucky to get this far. Probably, but what would we do with it?
I don't know.
Vanille lifted her hands in defeat. If they didn't know how it worked, they wouldn't be able to use it.
Well, we should take them. We might as well. We're becoming thieves, Vanille thought.
There was a sound.
Voices!
And coming closer fast. Without a sound, they stood up and ran.
They really are our enemies, Vanille whispered.
Did you say something?
No, nothing.
Her heart felt heavy, but she forced a smile. Right now, she had to concentrate on running. But there were so many things Vanille wished she could forget. Once they returned to the temple, not all was as they had left it. There were signs that someone had used the elevator. An intruder. "Someone from Cocoon is here," Fang whispered and readied her spear. They listened, but all was quiet. Vanille looked up to the vaulted ceiling. This temple was originally meant to test those who would become l'Cie. In the deepest part of the temple, they would face falsi anima to be both tried and selected. Those who harbored wicked thoughts, or those unfit to become l'Cie, would be unable to open the holy gates. It was told in the teachings of the priests. "Watch yourself."
I know.
They looked at each other and nodded, continuing down the path. Walking up the stairs, they tried not to let their footsteps be heard, and listened for any sounds of the intruder. Soon they reached the first door. If it was someone from Cocoon, they would not be able to open it, and would still be there, walking aimlessly in front of it.
Well, they say that there are barbarians down there that are no better than animals, but...
That is what the people of Cocoon thought of them. People who thought that would never be able to open the door. They shouldn't even be able to set foot inside this temple. There's no one in front of the door. The intruder must have opened the door and continued on.
But this isn't...
Vanille was at a loss for words. There were signs that someone had passed by here. There was no time to stop and think. The intruder could be nearing the center. They had to hurry. The sound of their footsteps no longer concerned them. They rushed up the stairs and then onto the elevator. But there was no one at the next door or the next. There should have been proof that the intruder wasn't evil, but how could that be? The only way this could have opened would be if the people of Cocoon found a way to trick the holy gates. This can't be happening. They had reached the deepest part of the temple, and the room beyond was to falsi. Even they had only been there once. It wasn't a place you could enter lightly. The door swung open and they found the intruder lying on the ground, unconscious. It was a girl. She must have gotten lost. Fang lowered her spear. The girl looked like she was the same age as Vanille and held no weapons. She's all alone. Fang looked at her with cold eyes. Vanille could tell what she was thinking. She was wondering whether or not she should be killed so that she wouldn't be able to speak of coming here to anyone. If they let her live, she would most likely bring people back here. Vanille looked over the fallen girl, and that's when...
Wait!
She knelt at the girl's side and grabbed her arm.
Look! This mark on her arm!
It was the exact same mark as their own.
She's been made into a... l'Cie.
She had the brand of a l'Cie, chosen by falsi anima, one who would be given a focus. Why? Fang's voice was shaking. Why did you choose someone from Cocoon? Her spirit echoed through the chamber as it fell to the floor. Why would the falsi do this? There was no answer. The falsi weren't beings that could be questioned by humans. How could she be a l'Cie of Grand Pulse? Are you trying to say that we're the same as them?
But it's someone from Cocoon. They can't just be given a focus.
A focus. When Vanille said the word, Fang touched her own arm. Below her hand, Vanille could see her white, burnt-out l'Cie brand that no longer retained its original shape. Fang had lost her memory and could no longer remember her own focus.
Oh,
Vanille thought.
So that's why.
She knew why the falsi had chosen a new l'Cie. Well, let's at least get her out of here. Fang picked up the girl. She didn't meet Vanille's eyes, but Vanille knew that they had shared the same thoughts. Fang left through the door. Picking up the spear from the floor, Vanille followed. She glanced back at falsi anima, but it remained silent. Outside the temple, they laid the girl on the ground, but she still didn't wake up. She's our replacement. Of course Fang knew, had known since seeing the girl's brand. Fang kept her head turned away, but Vanille could see that her face was sad. We're pathetic l'Cie, aren't we? We can't even remember our focus, so the falsi chose someone else.
That's not the only reason,
Vanille whispered deep within her heart.
It's my fault. It's all my fault because I... ran. The falsi saw straight through me. Now it's all my fault that this girl has been involved in our problems.
The girl's eyelids fluttered. She was about to wake up. They couldn't let her see them, so they hid in the shadows of the temple to watch her. The girl sat up. She must have been dizzy because she put her head between her knees and sat still for a moment. The brand on her arm had yet to catch her notice. Finally, she used the wall of the temple to drag herself onto her feet. Then her eyes stopped and stared at her arm. She had noticed the brand. The girl rubbed at it as if doing so would make it disappear. Doesn't she know about l'Cie? No, there are falsi in Cocoon.
Maybe she just doesn't know what it is because the shape is different?
But then what should they do? She didn't realize she had to find her focus, and she would turn into a Cie. But unless they told her who they truly were, they would be unable to explain anything to her. Looks like she knows. She suddenly fell apart. They could hear her screaming that it was just something someone had scribbled on her arm. Even from there, Vanille and Fang could see her brand evolve. The girl's fear had affected it. Now she must know that she was chosen as a lessee of Grand Pulse. No, of the hell where barbarians live. The girl was crying. Even from far away they could see her thin shoulders trembling. Finally she pushed herself off the wall and walked on her trembling legs. She looked so small and sad. This was something they would never be able to take back. The girl had nothing to do with anything, but she got caught up in their problems solely by the fact of her being there. Don't make that face.
But...
Once you were a lessee, there was no going back. Her fate had been changed forever, and it was all their fault. The only thing we can do is find our focus and complete it. Finish it for good. Then we can go back to Grand Pulse. If the girl was meant to be the replacement, then their focus would have to be the same. If they completed it, then she wouldn't have to become a Seath. That must have been what Fang was thinking, but even if they completed their focus, the girl was from Cocoon. Vanille stopped. The truth was too cruel.
Fang, let's forget our focus.
Fang's brand was dead. Even if she didn't complete her focus, she might not become a Seath. If that was true, then they didn't need to think about their focus anymore. We won't, she tapped Vanille on the leg. Your brand is still alive. If we don't complete our focus, you'll become a Seath.
It's all right. I don't.
You're the ones who said we'd always be together. Forever. Fang kept Vanille's face in her hands.
We'll always be together.
Yes.
And we will go home together.
That's what we promised, remember? Vanille placed her hands against Fang's and nodded.
No, you're right.
They had promised so long ago. It would be alright as long as they were together. They would never be parted. It was a promise she never wished to break. Chapter 4. The overwhelming number of people did not bother her as much as it had the previous day. Vanille felt calm and relaxed as she walked through the streets. Not wanting to run into those two men they had met the other day, Vanille suggested they walk in an area slightly apart from the place they had been the day before. Fang insisted that if they saw them again it would be easy for her to take them out, but she agreed to the plan anyway. The street they had seen yesterday had been lined with clothing and accessory shops, but today the place they found themselves in had an abundance of both food and drink.
Look, they're selling vegetables.
The stalls were bursting with colors of bright green, yellow, and red. On closer inspection they saw that each was large and looked fresh. Nothing like those vegetables from the garden we saw the other day.
But don't these look, I don't know, artificial? Like someone made them. I wonder if you can even eat them.
The vegetables were unnaturally matched in size and shape, like each was a replica of another. The ones they had picked from the garden were scrawny and tasteless, but you could tell that they were meant to be eaten. Maybe they have some strange way of making them.
Well, it is Cocoon.
Vanille imagined them pressing colored liquid into the shape of vegetables.
Surely not, she thought, shaking her head. They can't support this many people with a little pathetic garden like the one we saw. Cocoon is pretty big. Maybe if we go somewhere else, I'll be able to get my memory back.
Vanille didn't answer, looking off into the crowd. Fang was getting impatient. Vanille understood that. She looked at Fang, knowing what she was thinking. That girl had been turned into a lessee because of them, because they were taking so long to complete their focus. But that was wrong. Vanille knew that was wrong. Fang wasn't the one who had screwed up. That blame was all Vanille's. She sighed, then looked up as she felt Fang turn around beside her.
Fang?
Wait over there.
Wait!
But Vanille didn't stop her in time. She could only watch as Fang disappeared into the crowd. It seemed she would have no choice but to wait for Fang's return. She leaned against the nearest wall. Most of the shoppers walking in and out of the shops were women, and many of them had children tagging along with them. Perhaps because the shops here sold foodstuff and the women were buying dinner for their families. There was nothing strange about them. As she watched, Vanille thought there was something unnatural in what they were doing. Then she realized. Most of the people coming out of the grocery were empty-handed. While some of them might have simply not bought anything, it was unthinkable to think that it would be true for all of them.
Maybe they get it delivered?
Vanille thought. On Grand Pulse you could pay to get things delivered that were bulky or heavy, but then something small like food was something you should take home yourself. So maybe... but there could be another reason entirely. Vanille just shook her head, confused. Did you wait long? Suddenly Vanille felt something cold pressing up against her forehead. She screamed and jumped. "Ha! Sorry about that." Fang smiled and held out a can of some sort of drink. "You're so jumpy."
I can't help it,
Vanille said, pouting, but she took the can.
Where did you get this?
Bought it. Vanille looked at the can and then looked up at Fang. Where did she get the money? They didn't even know if cash was used on Cocoon. I used this, Fang said, pulling out the card they had taken yesterday.
Cocoon's such a weird place. I can't believe you can get anything with something like this.
She opened up her can and took a drink, motioning for Vanille to do the same. The can was a little strange, but it wasn't difficult to figure out how to open it.
Oh, it's good.
I told them to give me the sweetest drink they had. After the watery, tasteless stuff they had been eating recently, it was amazing drinking something where you could actually taste the sweetness. It was wonderful.
So how do you buy stuff with this?
I don't know how it works. I just copied what everyone else was doing. Like them, Fang said, pointing to the people in the shop nearby. Vanille could see that the woman there had a card like the one they carried. I watched the people in a store I passed by, and I thought, hey, maybe that's how it works.
So then those two men from yesterday really didn't have any money.
But they actually do have some cash on Cocoon. Fang looked over to a different store. It was pink and white with cute decorations hung on the storefront. A candy store. There were children running in and out of it, holding candy. Apparently taking your allowance to the candy store to buy some sweets was something children on both Cocoon and Grand Pulse enjoyed. Kids use cash, Fang said. They could see that all the adults used cards. Sometimes the owner of the card would press something on the card, or put something on the card. Then sometimes the store clerk would run the card through a strangely shaped machine. It seemed there were many ways to use the card. I saw a shop where they were selling weapons. So long as we have this, we can buy some. Fang grinned. We can fight.
But
those two men had been shockingly weak. Fang could defeat them barehanded. Even the fish and birds had been pathetic. It was likely that all the creatures on Cocoon, whether animal or human, didn't know how to fight. Weren't we chosen as the seed to fight, Cocoon?
Yes, but right now there would be no reason.
Yeah, it's so peaceful here. We probably don't even have to fight.
Yes, let's not fight.
Vanille nodded. Her voice sounded strange to her ears. She wondered if Fang noticed. Even if we aren't supposed to fight, what is our focus? If we don't find out? That again.
It always comes back around to that,
Vanille thought, sighing. A loud voice intruded on her thoughts.
Before we do that, why don't we go on the Foul Sea tour?
Vanille and Fang glanced at each other. We could just go to Euroday on our last day.
But the closer it gets to the fireworks festival, the more crowded it will be.
That's true. A group of older women passed by, talking in high spirits. What had they meant by Foul Sea tour? And Euroday? Perhaps that was a place where a Cocoon Foul Sea was enshrined. Fang and Vanille snuck in behind the women, trying to remain unobtrusive so they could listen in for more important information.
Why don't we get a private car? With all of us together, the price shouldn't be too high.
No, going by regular train should be just fine. The Foul Sea and Euroday must be far if they were planning on taking a train there.
I wonder how often the train comes. It should be fine if we don't have to wait too long. Why don't we ask at Bodhum Station? Then we're agreed. Alright, my daughter asked me to pick up something at this shopping mall.
That was all they had to say about the Foul Sea. Now their conversation slipped into what they were going to buy or what they should plan to eat. Just when they realized they weren't going to get any more out of the women, the group went into a shop. Fang and Vanille walked past a shop store without stopping. It was Euroday that they said, right?
Yes, the leader of these thieves.
They couldn't say for certain whether or not it was the same one who had stolen from them, but all the Foul Sea of Cocoon were the same to them. Then we must go and pay our respects.
We're going to go and see it?
If we go and see the Foul Sea of the enemy, then maybe we'll understand what our focus is. Or maybe I'll get my memory back. Something will happen.
But Euroday must be far. They said they were taking a train there.
Neither Fang nor Vanille had ever ridden on a train. The train that ran by their home was something that ran all the way to the ends of the earth. They weren't unusual in this. No one in their village had ever ridden on a train. People just didn't ride on trains, not usually. That's why they had been surprised to hear a couple of old ladies talking so casually about riding on a train. It made them question their initial opinion that Cocoon was such a pathetic place. I'll go any distance if I can get my memory back.
But we might not have enough money. We might not be able to ride with this cart alone.
She didn't want to go to Euroday. She didn't want to face a Foul Sea of Cocoon. Is that all? Fang said, laughing. We can go to the station and check. There are lots of ways we can get money. It will be fine. Let's just go. Fang turned on her heel. Once she made up her mind, that was the end of it. There was no way to stop her now. Vanille would just have to be prepared for whatever would come. She sighed and followed after Fang's footsteps. Before they could find out more on how to get to Euroday, they had to find out where Bodhum Station was first. They had thought if they had just walked a bit, they would find it, but that was not the case. So while buying ingredients for dinner, they asked where they could find it. They thought people might look at them oddly if they started asking where the station was, but they needn't have worried. It seemed there were quite a lot of travelers who came here. So strangers were very common. They would say, Oh, are you on vacation? Well, where are you from? In fact, Fang and Vanille thought they were being a little too friendly. They were told that any shop in the city carries maps for travelers, which can be taken for free. They were put there so the travelers not used to the city would not get lost. Putting up maps for travelers. That seems dangerous. A map like that, one that could show you every place in the city at a glance, would become a weakness in the hands of the enemy. A map was an important document meant to be kept secret. Vanille couldn't help but think badly of people who didn't even know something as simple as that. But the clerk looked at her oddly when she mentioned this. Apparently people on Cocoon didn't think that way. They left as soon as the clerk marked the station on the map for them. If they had stayed any longer, they might have given themselves away. They were more worried about their words or actions making them seem suspicious than they were about the clothing they wore.
Putting up maps for travelers? That seems dangerous.
Fortunately, the station wasn't too far away. It was about 15 minutes' walk from the shopping mall, and very close to the temple. But if they hadn't been given this map, they weren't sure they would have realized this was a station. The station at Bodhum looked familiar, and yet very different from the station they were familiar with on Grand Pulse.
It doesn't look like a station. It looks more like a store or something.
And look at that train, Fang pointed as they got closer to the station. It doesn't look like it would stay on the track. The train had a very rounded design. Saying it couldn't stay on the track was not quite correct, but it did seem to be lacking something. If a monster attacked it, it would go flying right off. Trains on Grand Pulse were made large and sturdy to withstand attacks by large monsters. Both the window frames and the roof were made of a thick material to avoid being smashed in.
I wonder if it'll even make it to Uriday okay,
Vanille said. Fang shrugged. No use worrying. First we've got to find out when the train leaves. Then we've got to know how much it costs and how many days it will take. They thought just by going into the station that they'd be able to find out all the answers, but they were wrong. They didn't know how to search for anything. First of all, there were so many different platforms that they didn't know where to go. At Grand Pulse there was only one, but here in Bodhum there were several, and it seemed that each had a train that was going to a different place. Even more surprising was how many trains were arriving. In their hometown the train only came in the morning and in the evening.
What should we do?
They wandered around the inside of the building, but still couldn't figure any of it out.
Are you alright? Can I help you?
It was a young mother with a small child. She must have seen that they were confused.
Well, we want to go to Uriday, but... To visit the Fal'Cie? The train to Uriday leaves from platform number 1.
Vanille and Fang exchanged glances and breathed a sigh of relief.
Say it!
Have a good trip, the young woman said, turning.
Wait, please. Can I ask you one more question?
There were still more things they had to ask.
How much does it cost to get to Uriday? Can we get there with this?
Vanille said, pulling out the card. The young woman laughed. Well, I don't know what your credit limit is, but I can tell you it will definitely be enough, so long as you don't get a special car. The woman they had seen before had talked of something like that too, though they mentioned a private car. It seemed there were many different ways to get to Uriday.
And, how many trains go to Uriday each day?
How many? Well... She cocked her head to the side to think. That must mean there weren't very many.
Oh, please don't tell me there's only one every couple of days. Huh? Oh no, will we have to wait several days before one comes?
Vanille began to worry. What would they do if they had to wait that long? But the young woman's laughter cut across her panic like a knife. Oh dear, you girls are so funny. It will be alright, just go to the station and wait a bit. One should come soon enough.
Really?
It's just, you asked me how many come in one day, and I've never really counted them before. There are just so many. The same they had said another strange thing. But fortunately this time they had no need to apologize. This time the young woman just laughed. If you don't want to wait for the train, you could always take an air bike. There is a place where you can rent them just outside the station. The price to rent a two-seater isn't too much different from the cost of a train ticket.
No, I like trains.
Actually, neither one of them knew how to drive an air bike, but she decided not to say so. If air bikes were something that even children on Cocoon knew how to use, they'd be thought of as suspicious again. Alright then, be careful and have a good trip. The young woman took the child's hand and walked over to another platform, a different one from the train that goes to Uriday.
Oh no, I forgot to ask.
What?
How many days it will take to get to Uriday?
Ah, but it really didn't matter. They knew they would be able to cover the price of the ticket, and they knew where to get on the train. That was all the information they needed.
I hope if we leave tomorrow, we can at least arrive by the day after that.
It doesn't matter how long it will take, so long as we can meet this Fal'Cie. Vanille's heart grew heavy when she heard the word Fal'Cie. But when she had managed to forget it, Fang had reminded her once again. Are you tired? Fang looked at her, worried.
Well, Just a little.
Vanille replied, and tried her best to smile. Chapter 5. The train slipped from Bodhum Station as though gliding on water. It began with the people on the platform slowly moving off into the distance. Then soon the entire city began rushing past.
Wow.
Vanille and Fang both leaned against a train window, watching the city rush by them. Soon they were out of the city and hugging the coastline.
Look at that! That island is floating!
Oh, wow.
They felt eyes on their backs and turned, to find the other passengers staring at them in surprise. Vanille and Fang hastily returned to their seats. They hadn't even realized their faces had been pressed to the window. You could still see the fog left from their breath. Someone snickered. Vanille turned red and looked at her feet. Glancing out the window again, Vanille saw the ocean sparkling with the sunlight that fell across it. Suddenly the train swerved and the lead car came into view. Vanille was shocked. There were no rails underneath the train.
Look at that,
Vanille mouthed, covering her mouth with her hands so no one could see what she was saying. She didn't want to draw attention to themselves again, but she couldn't contain her excitement. She pulled at Fang's arm, pointing out the window at the floating islands. Fang nodded.
The technology they have on Cocoon is just amazing,
Vanille whispered in Fang's ear. Maybe if they searched every corner of Grand Pulse, they could find something like this, though it was unlikely that they would ever find a train that could fly through the air. One of the floating islands was coming up near their window, but as soon as it was there, it rushed past and was behind them. The train was weaving among the islands like a thread and cloth.
Look, it's an air bike!
The voice of a young boy squealed from the seat in front of them. Vanille craned her neck to try and see what he was talking about. There were 3 vehicles just outside the train. These must be the airbags that woman had told them of yesterday.
They're so fast! Daddy, which is faster, an air bike or your airship?
Of course my airship is faster. Unlike the young boy, who was too short to see, they could see the top of his father's head. His hair was like a bird's nest. It almost seemed as if a little bird would come poking its head out at any moment.
There are lots of islands.
The city of Bodhum is made up of lots of islands, he explained to his son. His voice sounded kind.
Is that Bodhum? That place that floats up really high?
Really high? No, that's not Bodhum. That's a place called Eden, and Eden isn't an island. Her ears perked up when she heard Eden. That was the place those 2 men had talked about the other day. But it seemed it wasn't a mountain or a valley. It was a high place, but not a floating island? Then what was it?
Daddy, have you ever been to Eden?
Of course I have. I'm a pilot. I've even been to a place called Palampolo. They have more stores than any other city in Cocoon.
Do they have a toy store? Lots. And a chocobo store?
They have lots of pet stores.
No, a chocobo store.
Well, I don't know about that. They weren't talking about anything important, but Vanille enjoyed listening to them. This is probably what it was like to have a family. They continued talking about all the places his pilot father had been. There was a place where they had kept monsters and let them roam free. A city that was filled with games and other fun things. Vanille began to realize, as she listened to them, how many different places Cocoon had and how many people must live here. If only they weren't enemies. If only the foul sea of Cocoon hadn't stolen so much from them. They could go to and from Cocoon and Grand Pulse freely. What a wonderful world that would be. She didn't want to fight, not with his father and his son, or that young mother they met at the station yesterday, or that group of elderly women. She didn't want to hurt a single one of them.
But I'm probably wrong, Vanille thought. I've always been told we must fight, but I'm weak, so I don't want to fight. Fang would never feel like this, never feel lost. She would fight no matter what the cost. But
Fang doesn't fight because she is strong, though she is quite strong. She fights because she is kind. She can never forget those who hurt the people she loves.
That is why I can't let her fight, Vanille thought.
Fang would never forgive herself if she hurt someone who was innocent. Your brand is still active. If we don't complete our focus, you'll become a XIII. Vanille remembered the words Fang had said the day before. It didn't matter which path she chose, to fight or not to fight. Whatever path she chose, and all the paths she has chosen in the past, only led to Fang's sorrow. Hey, what's up? Vanille looked up, surprised. She had gone off into her own head and had not realized. She looked out the window and noticed they had stopped. They were at a station.
What station is this?
The last stop. Didn't you hear? They said it was XIII Station. All the passengers were standing up and forming a line down the aisle. The father and son who had sat in the seat in front of them were already gone.
I'm glad I didn't ask how many days the trip would take,
Vanille said, sighing. Slipping into the line of passengers, they exited the train. They had no worries of getting lost, as all the passengers were walking in the same direction. A plaza stretched out in front of the station, and beyond that was a building that looked something like an energy plant. The plaza had stalls selling balloons and candy. It was as noisy and filled with people as the shopping mall in Bodhum. There were people taking pictures of themselves in front of the energy plant. Young couples walking hand in hand, a group of young boys, an elderly couple. All of Uriday had a very festive atmosphere. One corner of the plaza had a group of students listening attentively to their teacher. This plant is maintained by PSICOM, and it creates most of the energy that is used in the cities close to Uriday. All of the things that make our lives easier run on the energy created in this plant. Do all of you understand? Yes! The children screamed, their voices excited. The adults walking beside them smiled. I can't believe these people, Fang whispered. They know nothing about how their Falsi took everything from us.
Yeah, they know nothing. But is ignorance a sin?
Vanille wondered. Even if they didn't know, it would be a sin. Then no matter what, they were in the wrong. Both paths led only to sorrow.
Hey Fang, can I choose nothing? Can I turn my eyes away from all of this? It's okay to run,
she whispered to herself. Looking at Fang, she knew this was something she would never be able to say to her. Once we complete our focus, we can leave all this behind. Right, Vanille? Instead of answering, Vanille grabbed Fang's hand, just like when they were children, together against a world of enemies. As long as they were together, they could stay alive. As long as they were together, it didn't matter where they ran.
We will get home. We will.
Even if it went against Fang's own wishes. The energy plant where PSICOM awaited was just in front of them. Vanille tightened her grip on Fang's hand and allowed them to be swept along with the crowd of people.